So in recent chapters of One Piece, we see that King the Wildfire has had so much more relevance than anybody could have seen coming. I mean, we're on Egghead in the Final War saga, and he is still a very important topic of discussion. Perhaps even more than Kaido himself. I mean, Kaido's been ousted as an emperor. He's long gone. He's no longer a topic. But King is constantly being discussed. And today, we're going to try to gauge how strong he might be and the overall potential of Lunarians. So let's start from the very beginning. When King was first introduced alongside Queen, he obviously wasn't a normal, human in One Piece. He had wings and everything. But it was easy to just assume that he may have been Skypian or some other race that we've already seen, because we have plenty of characters in One Piece with wings. But then we move on to Big Mom's encounter with him. And that's when things started to really get interesting. Big Mom pointed out the fact that there are 3 races she doesn't have on her island. One of them was lost into the annals of history, but King is right there in front of her, so which implies King is the very last survivor of his race. And it's interesting because at that time, the only thing that Big Mom had to go off of was the flames on his back and his wings. She couldn't tell that he had brown skin or white hair, but she knew instantly that he was Lunarian. Now, all throughout Onigashima and Wano in general, we've had this distinction of Lunarians being referred to as gods. Even Whitebeard himself tells about stories he's heard about a land of gods atop the Red Line in Marijua. A story about an ancient race that could survive in any environment in the world. But is that really enough? Is that moniker really enough to prop up this race to the levels that we've seen so far? No, of course not. But we can see that this race was so feared that the world governments thought that it was vital for them to be annihilated. So that says it all. Look at the other powerful races in One Piece like giants. Have they ever been feared to the point that the world government thought that it was important to wipe them off the face of the earth? Never. But Lunarians were. But that's not where it ends, because as much as the world government feared Lunarians, they saw the potential. So it may have been the case where they knew that they had to keep one alive to learn more about this race and harness their DNA. And it's gotten to the point where their DNA, or King's specifically, was used to replace an entire world power. And we see that in the Seraphims. One thing to point out is the fact that these Seraphims that we've seen so far, they're just children. They haven't matured yet to the point of being a full Lunarian adult. I think it was Edison that implied that being an adult will give them access to more potential and more power. And yet, even in these younger versions, they've given people like Blackbeard and Luffy a hard time or a bit of struggle solely because of the Lunarian genes inside of them. But let's talk about King and his portrayal and what he's done in the series so far, because of course, he's the focal point of this video. When we got King's flashback towards the end of his fight against Zoro, we got a lot of tidbits that really hyped up King's strength, even as early as those days when he was still, a young kid. His name was originally Albert, but Kaido said, he's too strong to have a name like that. His name should be King. And even during the time of Marineford, when Kaido was getting ready to attack Whitebeard, we're told in the Viva card, the person he brought with him was King. No other beast pirate is mentioned, so this should imply that Kaido had so much faith in King's strength that he thought it was important to bring him along. Initially, when King was first introduced, there were certain expectations and standards that he was held to. Many people saw it as him being Cat's equal, and there was certain merit to that with the fact that the Beast Pirate and Big Mom Pirate crews kind of mirrored each other in structure. So to balance things out, King and Cat should be on pretty much the same level and damn near equals. And then there's another component of it with the fact that Cat was an observation Haki specialist who had future sight, and he was important for Luffy's growth in observation Haki. The observation with King was that he would be an armament specialist and have advanced armament, and he would be important for Zoro to gain this ability in the same way that Cat did for Luffy. And the reality was nothing like that, not even close. What Oda ended up revealing with Lunarians and King is the fact that when that flame is on their back, they have the ability to not only reduce damage, but to just nullify it entirely, to the point that you got people like Zoro saying they're practically invincible. I think the one panel that spoke the loudest on this is when King blew himself up and he took 0 damage. I mean, how do you do that? How do you self-destruct but take no damage whatsoever? And what are the limits of this? How far does this damage negation go? Because I'm not gonna lie, there's some things in the story that really make me scratch my head and wonder, what is it with Lunarians? Like, are they really invincible when that flame is burning? It really makes me think that there's more to Lunarians that we haven't seen yet. That's why they're still so relevant. And that's why King is still relevant, because their potential is higher than what we've seen on panel. That's why a person may be rewarded 100 million berries just for information on Lunarians, not even turning one in. Just information. So maybe King's ceiling is higher than what we've seen because he didn't get the chance to learn from other Lunarians. He was taken as a kid and didn't get to develop and mature his power in an environment that would have best suited him. And even still, I think King's power as we saw it was still insane as it was, because look at who his opponent was. When it comes to the whole Cat and King comparison, I used to subscribe to the idea that they're on the same level because of the crew structure, but after the recent arc, I don't really buy into that idea anymore because I feel like everybody has their own merits. They have their own unique traits that can be used to deduce their power. And for King, we've seen a whole lot. The way he dismantled Zoro was just absolutely insane. And I think it was very important for Zoro to show out on the rooftop because then it would make us understand that Zoro was no slouch. He wasn't lacking at all. He just couldn't overcome the monster that was King the Wildfire. I feel like from what we saw on the rooftop, Zoro showed us that he was far above the Luffy that we saw in Whole Cake Island. We saw in the early parts of Wano that Luffy was struggling with Kaido. He couldn't do any damage at all. Yet here Zoro was on the rooftop impressing the Emperors with his attacking ability. And yet again, King made absolute fodder out of this version of Zoro. A Zoro that was able to penetrate the defenses of Kaido, the king of the beast, and yet couldn't land a single significant blow on King, with the same attack, mind you. And one thing that really makes me wonder even till this point, even far after the fight has been over, is the fact that Zoro thought that it would be no point to attack him with the flames off. He said that King is blocking and dodging now that he's able to use Conquerors, yet he never landed any attack while he was using Conquerors. And you know, at the time in my mind, I just assumed this meant that the fact that King was blocking and everything, I just assumed that Conqueror's Haki was one of the things that could penetrate this seemingly invincible Lunarian defense. But I won't lie, now I'm at the point where I'm just not sure. I'm just not able to confidently say that Conqueror's Haki will obliterate this Lunarian defense because while Zoro and Luffy were struggling with the Seraphims, why didn't they just use more power? Why didn't they just go harder? Why didn't they just attack them with their strongest Conqueror's Haki attacks to put them down? Maybe it was for the plot. Maybe it's just one of those things that has no explanation for the sake of the story. Because I do think this kind of thing does happen from time to time. Like, you look at King versus Marco, and King looked like a bum outright when him and Queen were fighting Marco. But at this point, I'm not going to put Marco over King at any point. He's just shown too much. He's just showed out far too much for me to put him below Marco. And just think about it. Had they known this guy was Lunarian, he may have had an even higher bounty than he does currently. His bounty is already higher than Marco's. But if they knew this was a Lunarian on Kaido's crew, he may have been even in the 2 billions for all we know. And there's still the glaring fact that why did the world government find it important to annihilate them if all you had to do was learn their secrets and defeat them just like that? The thing that I'm going to go with right now is the fact that they were scared more of their potential more than they were of what they could do at the time. Or who knows, maybe the Lunarians that were alive back then had already reached their potential and the world government had to find some way to destroy them before they themselves realized just how far they were ahead of everybody else. Kind of like the whole thing with the Saiyans and Frieza. You know, Frieza knew the threat that the Saiyans posed. He knew that he couldn't stand up to them once they became who they were meant to be. So the development of Lunarians is what really stands out for me right now. Going back to the whole thing between a kid Lunarian and an adult Lunarian, we see King is able to use his devil fruit with the flames on consistently. The kids are not able to use their devil fruits at all while their flame is on. That's just one thing that I can point out that really shows that there's so much growth in Lunarians as they age and as they gain more experience. So can you imagine if it got to the point where a Lunarian is able to keep their speed while keeping the flame on? How do you even contend against that? Or imagine King had a teleportation or speed devil fruit. It's stuff like that that makes you understand why this race was given the distinction of being called the race of gods. And why King the Wildfire might be much more dangerous than meets the eye. Because he might not know it himself. He might have potential that he hasn't unlocked. But those are all my thoughts on King's power and Lunarians in general. Let me know what you think though. Why do you think that the world government saw it fit to wipe out the Lunarians? And how strong do you think King is right now? And how strong do you think he may be if he was allowed to develop more? Comment all your thoughts down below. But also don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more videos like this.